What's up, Cassius? How you doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing really well, bro. I mean, if I were to complain, bro, I deserve a punch in the face, man, because things are just going really well, man. I'm healthy. My family's healthy. You know, I'm
No, right
happy.
on, right on. Thanks for joining me, man. Where are you based at? Are you in California or Florida right now? Or
Split between Miami and LA, and at the moment in Los Angeles.
okay, so man, how is it down there with all the fires and everything right now?
The truth is, it actually doesn't impact like the city of LA all that much. If you're living in the hills, I could see it definitely impacting your lifestyle. And like San Francisco today, I don't know if you've seen the photos that are going out. San Francisco's bathed in this crazy
hmm
fire right now. It's insane up there. But I'm very lucky. LA, the city, is kind of skirting right through it.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I know I'm up in Washington, by the Vancouver area, so close to Portland and everything. And on Monday, the smoke passed by because it was really windy, but it's like, man, just how far it's going and everything. So it's wild.
Crazy, man.
That's just the year, I guess, 2020, all this crazy stuff, unfortunately.
Exactly.
So I mean, yeah, I mean about that, obviously we'll talk about Huracan. Did I pronounce that correctly? First of all, I get
Yeah, yeah.
the name. Cool, cool.
Beautifully.
Um, but I think I saw somewhere that you were working on something else too. Like, have you been filming stuff? And I'm curious, like, of the challenges of filming during this time, right, with the
Right,
pandemic and
right.
all that. So yeah.
Man, well, I was really lucky to produce a film, co-produce a film that we shot in New York this past winter called The Birthday Cake,
hmm
uh, a gangster Christmas movie with like an unbelievable cast. And that one, the director and lead producer, Jimmy and Raul, are in New York right now delivering the final cut of that film to our sales agent and everything this week. So we have our next one right around the corner coming out, and so many projects on the horizon. But definitely right now, we're navigating the COVID situation, and thankfully the unions have released guidelines for how to shoot during the pandemic, and they're onerous, but at the same time, like, you need to protect your cast and crew. So thankfully there is a game plan for how to do it, and we're just wrapping our heads around it.
Yeah, definitely got to kind of just make the adjustments, go with this flow, this temporary flow, right? So,
Right.
but it's interesting to me though, is like, do you think that this whole COVID thing will like change the movie industry for like permanently? I mean, because theaters, they haven't been in business, right? So
Right.
everything's going
Right.
digital and all that. Like, that's gonna leave a mark, right?
I think it's accelerating the trend of movie going and movie consumption towards streaming. I think that there will, when I look at something like the theater and Broadway, I see the fact that Hamilton can still be a phenomenon hundreds of years after theater had its heyday, right? So
hmm
I don't know that movie theaters will go extinct. I think that there will always be space and interest in watching a big event type movie, or the types of movies that the audience experience really um, empowers, like a thriller, horror movie, comedy, like the types of projects that, like, if you're with other people, it accentuates the experience.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think theaters will always have a role in that. But if anything, maybe people are now just more comfortable consuming like the premiere of a film on a streaming platform, which is great news for Huracán because we come out on HBO this Friday and HBO Max, the streaming services, for our official premiere. So like it ends up working, I think, to our advantage a little bit.
Yeah, exactly, for sure, and that's going to be awesome. So yeah, man, of course, I got to know like what led you to this career in film? Like, was this something you always wanted to do, or you just like kind of fell into it?
Well, growing up, there were two things that I liked. I was always loved sports, so like athletics is a huge part of my life. But professionally, I had always had I loved to hustle. You know what I mean? So I was the kid in the neighborhood with the lemonade stand. I had a mobile car washing business. I had a carpooling business when I was in high school. And I loved having an idea for something and then seeing it come to fruition, and also seeing like the ways it came to fruition that I expected, and the ways that was unexpected, and kind of incorporating that into my approach. Like I always found that to be exciting and fun. And separately, I loved literature. So growing up, I was like voracious reader. I loved consuming literature, and I started writing short stories while I was in high school. And I got very lucky to get a scholarship to USC in LA. And I went there with the anticipation to study entrepreneurship. And to cut a very long story short, I took a film class, and in the film class, they exposed me to this idea that I hadn't really understood before, which was to be a filmmaker, to be a writer director, you effectively had to be both an entrepreneur on one side and, of course, an artist and a creative on the other. And that really helped concretize like my interest in it, because it showed the two things that I have this deep passion for. I feel like are, the foundation of who I am and how I like to spend my time. I saw it them combined in filmmaking.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, what would you say was kind of the hardest thing? I mean, sure, there's probably a lot of difficulties in everything coming together, but like something that stood out is like, all right, this was a big challenge, and feel so good about getting over that hump
As it relates to Huracan or in general?
in general.
Well, I mean, as a director, and directing is the thing that I get the most pleasure from.
Hmm.
Directing, when I'm on set directing, I feel like my best self, Again, as someone with long history in athletics and competing, the closest I can get to that feeling now is when you're on set, you have a very limited period of time. It's so high pressure. There's so many variables at play, and you have to execute. And if you don't, you fail.
Hmm.
And I love that. Like, I love the feeling of that pressure. And as a director, the hardest thing to do is make your first movie. That's by far the hardest thing. And I spent years. I graduated from USC in 2014, and I spent several years trying to get my first movies off the ground. And for one reason or another, I failed. And whether it was the script was too expensive to produce, or they wanted a director with experience, or the Latino driven projects that I was creating, like, people didn't think that they were commercially viable because they had predominantly Hispanic casts. Those types of hurdles, I just kept running into them. And I would say the biggest thing that happened was I realized I was putting myself in a position, as both a filmmaker and an entrepreneur, I was putting myself in a position where I was allowing other people to dictate my ability to get the project made, because I wrote scripts that required a certain budget.
Hmm.
So what I realized was I need to design a project that I can do for, at the time I was thinking no budget, like literally I had $10,000 that I was going to that I could put into the movie. And I said, if this is the only money that I have, it has to be makeable for that. So people working for free, like no expectation from a quality standpoint, and just giving myself the opportunity to actually just make my first movie. And regardless of if it turned out to be a success or a failure, I would have had the opportunity to learn, and to really get that experience making my first feature film. And I've just been very lucky to have had a great team come together behind it, and now to be getting this amazing reception for Huracan, which of course is the project that
Hmm.
was born from that period of time, from that decision to just make my first movie. Now I'm very lucky to have had the New York Times champion our film and give us this beautiful review. And then, of course, now HBO partner with us to bring it to the world.
Yeah, definitely, man. Very exciting, very cool there. And directing obviously, but you're also starring in it. So like that's the double whammy, right? So what was it like is that juggling a bit, or is it easier that way?
Right. So, Huracan is a psychological thriller, right, about an aspiring MMA fighter who suffers from multiple personality
Mm.
disorder. So, when I devised this idea and when I set out as a producer in bringing it to life, we started casting for the different roles. And I didn't have any intention at the outset of acting in this movie. But as we got further and further along in the process, the challenge of casting that role became more and more apparent. And on the one side, the lead actor would have to be credible, as someone suffering from a severe mental illness. And that, for me, the authenticity of bringing the emotional truth of that illness to life, that was the number one most important thing in the movie, was that the actor was able to deliver on that. And that's already a very difficult and high bar to set.
Yeah.
But then separately, that same actor also had to be credible as an amateur fighter becoming professional, which is not the same as a UFC fighter, which is not the same as an actor who we give 3 months of kickboxing classes to. It had to be someone who had put in a couple years, to be realistic as someone making that leap. So it just happened that I had the experience on the MMA side, and I'd been studying acting for long enough as a director that I sort of intuitively knew that my very limited range as an actor. This role happened to fall in that range. So I made the horrifying, fucking terrifying decision to also act in the movie. And man, thankfully, luckily, we've been rewarded for that, you know?
Yeah, definitely. It's that you got to take the risk, right? And it pays off sometimes.
That's, bro, if I could summarize everything I've learned, it'd really be something like what you just said. You know, it's really just, the takeaway for me is, for this project to exist, I had to be willing to take that risk. I had to be willing to risk failure. In this case, because I also acted in the movie, I had to be willing to risk the humiliation of it
Hmm.
not working, of it looking like this egotistical,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh, I'm gonna do everything and be the star and all that shit. Bro, that could have been such an embarrassing failure.
yeah,
It really could have been. And man, I'm telling you, that kept me up for nights, bro. That was, the possibility of that was so scary for me. Like, but I had to just say, if it happens, it happens. I'm ready to make my movie, and I want the experience that's going to come with doing it, you know?
yeah, yeah, for sure, man. And I mean, Huracan, very interesting story. When I first heard about it and everything, I was like, okay, wow, that's definitely a unique spin on it. Because I think that the mental aspect of fighting in general is something that even still, like, it's becoming more, open and talked about how it's such a big factor in things. But I think it's still more of a big deal than people put out there compared to like the physical
Right,
and all that. But the
right.
inspiration for this story, I'm curious about, because I think I saw in an interview you did a while back. I think you said it was like part of a dream you had, right? Is that you kind of had a dream there?
Well, man, yeah, you've done your homework.
Yeah.
So it's a nightmare, actually.
Yeah, my bad, nightmare.
There's a nightmare, a recurring nightmare that I had growing up that does speak to like Alonso, the main character, his backstory. So just to give you some context, dissociative identity disorder, which is the clinical name for multiple personality disorder, is a trauma-based illness. And what that means is, there are some mental illnesses that, when you're going through puberty and your brain chemistry changes because your hormones are exploding, if you genetically are primed and positioned to have a mental illness, it can just present itself as a result of going through puberty and your brain chemistry changing. So schizophrenia, for example, is one of the ones that fit in that category. Now, dissociative identity disorder is not. So
Mhm.
for you to develop this mental illness, you had to endure an event or a series of events that were so traumatic in your childhood that your brain, as a defense mechanism, created this split and created this other personality, and then took the memory of that event and hid it in your long-term memory bank. So unless you've been through the type of extreme and intensive therapy that is shown in Huracán, called EMDR, for example, a lot of people who suffer from this illness don't know what it is that caused this life-defining illness. So when I was doing my research and learned that, for me, that's where the film really started to take shape, because I felt, what a fascinating story arc to have a character who has to, through therapy, confront and uncover what happened to him as a child. Um, Really, where the authenticity came in was, my dad is a circuit court judge in Miami-Dade. And at the time, he was in juvenile court, which is family court. And in every case brought in front of him, there was the claim of child abuse, child abandonment, or child neglect. And there were, man, it's like some of the heaviest, most heartbreaking stories you've ever seen. And a lot of the cases involve some form of mental illness, being whether it's PTSD or some of the more severe ones like DID, that the kids who have been through these traumatic situations develop. And it happened that there were two cases specifically that I saw going through the court system that helped inspire the backstory for Alonso. And one of them dovetailed with this nightmare that I had, obviously completely unrelated. And that's really where that story arc came from for the movie.
Yeah, yeah, man, it's very interesting, and just I think it's cool too how you're shedding kind of the light on this whole thing. Like I said, about how the mental aspect of fighting is still something kind of not buried, but not as spotlighted as maybe it should
Right.
be. And you're bringing that to light, and then kind of the Latino part of the community and
Right.
everything. It's a really cool thing. And I don't know, is that kind of a conscious decision you made to do this, or it kind of obviously fits with the story and how things came together? But yeah.
Well, I would say that on the Latino side, like I come from a mixed family with family members from all over the place. So I have my abuela's from Colombia. I have her husband, my grandfather's Irish. My other grandfather, he passed away, is Lithuanian. So I have like parts of, I feel like from all over. Half my family's Jewish, half my family's Catholic. So I was bar mitzvahed, but we celebrate Christmas. And it happens, that the family and the culture that I kind of grew up with and was exposed to, cultura latina, especially being from Miami, was one that I was always very close with. And I felt, as a storyteller, I saw that there was an opportunity because of the lack of representation, combined with the misrepresentation of Latinos in film and TV. And I just felt, that's one way that for myself as a storyteller, I can be making an impact, and I could be doing something that I don't see other people doing. And on the psychology side, for me, it felt really important. It felt really interesting. I would say is the first thing that stuck out was like, man, this is such an intrigue, like mental illness and abnormal psychology for me are so intriguing and so thought provoking that I've always felt like they make for good subject matter for a movie. And then the more I dove into sort of my dad's world of juvenile court and started getting to know the court appointed therapists, seeing the halfway houses, meeting the peer counselors, that's really where I saw it that so many, like, it sounds like a cliche. People say hurt people, and sort of tracing the lineage of trauma. But man, that is real. And seeing how kids or men, let's say men or women who are caught up in the criminal justice system, so many of them, you could trace their roots back to earlier exposures to the system through child protective services, families who were in disarray, dysfunction, trauma at home, and how that manifests later in life. And I think MMA and fighting happens to uniquely maybe attract people who have been through traumatic situations, only because to fight requires such an extreme mindset, such an extreme psychological makeup. And I have so much respect for fighters. That's why I try to make it clear. I love MMA and I'm a martial artist, but I'm not a fighter. I don't compete in MMA, because I think it's really important that the people who do are given the respect that they deserve for putting their health on the line, and really for me, it was like, especially once we did our first screenings and film festivals, like people reached out to me, whether it's local sort of unknown fighters, like people reached out to me and said, man, like it was crazy for me watching your movie, because in some ways it felt like I was watching my own story. And again,
Damn,
like,
that's a
this is a
compliment.
movie, so like, no one lived this exact life that we're putting on screen. But I think especially in fighting, like people can identify with the pain of going through trauma and not really knowing where to turn or what to do with it, and finding in mixed martial arts, finding in sports an outlet and a path to get sort of validation and recognition, and be shown that what you do and you as a person are worth something.
Yeah, for sure. That was very well put. Yeah. You mentioned not being a fighter and everything, but with your background, did you ever consider, actually fighting though?
Well, I think I will end up taking an amateur fight and just getting that experience, because
Yeah.
I'm so curious I know how scared I'm going to be, man. I'm going to be terrified. Like I already know, like going into it, like fight week, even an amateur fight, like it's going to be horrifying. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, like, especially my experience with Huracán, I grow so much from those types of experiences. You know what I mean? So I do think I will end up doing that. It will not be my career, because I have a mindset that if you really want to be exceptional in something, it has to be your commitment and it has to be your goal, and you have to be dedicated like 100% to it. So for me, that's filmmaking, and MMA is like a hobby that maybe is more of an obsession. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
But yeah, man.
Well, I mean, hey, if CM Punk could do it, you can do it.
Well, it's funny, man, because CM Punk takes so much heat in the MMA community, right? But I mean, dude, these guys in WWE are great athletes.
That
You
is
know what I'm
true. Yeah.
saying? It's not the same. Like, I wouldn't call it a sport necessarily, because obviously, like, the results are predetermined and stuff like that. But those guys are fantastic athletes. And for him to risk everything, to go and actually fight, like, and when he fought Mickey Gall, like, Mickey Gall's a real
Yeah, yeah.
fucking killer, dude. So I respect that. And like, it didn't go his way, but
He
How
tried.
many other people do you see taking that risk?
Yeah, exactly.
Not a lot, you know?
Yeah. A lot easier for people to knock him when they weren't in that position. But yeah, yeah, it's not his fault he got the opportunity. So yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I mean, speaking of real fighters, though, um, Jorge Masvidal was in the film. Of course, he's kind of the big rival, right, or the final boss sort of opponent.
Final, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Final
yeah.
opponent.
So curious, what was his response when you mentioned it to him? Obviously, he liked it enough to be in the movie, but like
Right,
when
right.
you brought it up to him,
Yeah, man. Well, we actually did it so cool, man. We got the I got the opportunity to connect with him in late 2017 when he was actually in camp for his Wonder Boy fight at UFC 217, which
hmm
was at Madison Square Garden, which actually was my first time ever going to a live UFC event. Was 217 in
good
MSG.
card for that.
Dude, Dillashaw, Cody won, Joanna Rose,
Yep.
Bisping GSP, man, insane, such a
Yeah.
dope card.
Lucked out.
Obviously, the fight that night didn't go Jorge's way.
Yeah.
He lost a 3-round decision to Wonder Boy. Frustrating performance. He felt like he could have done so much more, and I was lucky to have the opportunity to meet him at this point. And as he was kind of really determining what his next steps were going to be, he had the time to give us to help support our movie and bring more authenticity and visibility to it. So I think at the end of the day, why he agreed to be in it, why he agreed to put his name on it, and he's an executive producer now alongside his manager Abe Kawa, is because he saw, man, that I, as a Miami guy trying to make a passion-driven movie set in Miami, Latino-driven story, touching on important and difficult issues like mental illness in the Latino community. I think he saw an opportunity to help support this project, and to help support me. And for me at the time, even, it was so humbling because this is January of 2000, late January of 2018 when we shot his scenes. Um, he wasn't the superstar that he is today, but in my mind, he was such a star in my mind because this was the real deal. Like, I didn't care if he was world famous or not. This is the guy who really fought in backyards in Perrine with Kimbo Slice refereeing. This is the guy who's fought all over, from Japan to Oregon. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yep.
Like, and for me, it was like, as a Miami guy, to have what, in my mind, the greatest fighter ever from Miami in my movie, which was true at the time and is now like now the whole world knows. But
It's
in
crazy.
Miami and diehard MMA fans knew that already. For me, that was already such a win. It was such a win, and I will always be grateful to him for giving us his time and for lending his name to the project.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that is awesome. And it's funny because, yeah, he did have a full career by that point, too. People still don't realize how long, he's been
Right,
doing it. So, yeah,
right.
definitely an OG. But, as for an actor, without, giving away total spoilers, I guess, on things, but like, how was his acting, would you say, as, being the guy who's in that film, how'd he do? Pretty good?
Well, I'm really excited to give him a bigger role in our next project. Something that really lets him strut his stuff and do
Yeah,
his
yeah.
thing, and hopefully we get more of his time. But one of the really cool takeaways for me as both a filmmaker and as a martial artist was the experience of moving with him in the cage and sparring with him and all of that. Like, even no matter how many years I think that you've trained in martial arts, there was just something different when moving with someone like Jorge, who's such a world-class athlete and fighter, that it really just shows you the levels of his technique, of his control, of his touch, of his
hmm
precision. Like, those things really stood out to me. And he could have very easily at any point knocked me out unconscious. Like, would have been so easy for him to have done that, and then boom, my movie's fucked, our shooting day is ruined, you know what I mean? And he feels great about himself. But
Yeah.
thank God he did not do that, you know what I'm saying? And he was able to show so much restraint that one of the things that we get, one of the pieces of feedback we get when people watch our movie is they love the action. The action feels so visceral. It feels so immediate. It feels so different from most movies because we didn't have a stunt coordinator. So it's not like someone was coming in and it was like, okay, this is how we're going to fake that and fake this. It was like, no, we were filming sparring. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
yeah.
And so that's why it feels different. That's why it looks different. And thankfully, we had a world-class fighter like Jorge who was able to make contact without inflicting irreparable damage. You know?
Yeah.
So I will, my brain health and everything will be indebted to him forever for that.
Quite a luxury indeed. Awesome. Awesome. Well, man, I think that might be all I have for Huracan questions, but I got to know before we wrap up here, what is one of your favorite movies or something that I'm sure, you have multiple to choose from, but what's
Right,
something that kind of, because when you're making film, of course, you have inspirations you take things out of, right? Of course, you don't totally
right,
copy everything, but ones that you're like, oh man, I love that movie
right.
for these reasons. So what are some of your top picks?
Well, there are two movies more than any that really influenced Huracan. And they might sound like, well, how that sounds so different, but Black Swan on the one hand and Whiplash on the other. And both of those are stories about artists who are obsessed to the point of self-destruction with their craft.
Yeah.
And those were definitely two templates that I looked at. I was designing the story of Huracan to figure out, okay, well, I love these movies. They're fun, they're exciting, they're thought provoking, they have pathos, like they have all these elements that as an audience member, I love to consume and I love that experience. And I thought my goal with Huracan, my dream was to make a film of such a quality that it stood alongside a Whiplash, a Black Swan, giving audiences a similar type of experience, a similar thrill ride, thought-provoking thrill ride. And I mean, with the New York Times championing us and HBO putting their name behind us, it really goes a long way to showing what we accomplished as a team in bringing Huracan to life.
Yeah, for sure. And I can see that the comparisons there. I mean, I know Black Swan's been out for a while. I haven't seen it, but I know much about it. But Whiplash, I love that movie. So that is very
Yeah,
cool
man.
there. But yeah, all right, Cash. I won't keep you any longer, man. I'm really excited to see this movie though. I love the idea right from the get-go. And yeah, it's as somebody who likes film and MMA, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Cool, man.
For sure.
Drake, thank you, bro. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course, man. So I look forward to, whatever's next for you. Is Colossus, is that something you're working on coming soon? So,
Definitely, that's in development. Really
okay.
tricky right now in the COVID world to put an international sort of half in Brazil, half in Ireland TV show together.
Hmm.
But that I can guarantee you will be made one day, and that's going to be the definitive MMA TV show.
All
That's going to be
right.
Game of Thrones for MMA.
All right. Love it. All right. Thanks so much,
Yeah, man.
man.
Cool. Thank you, Drake.
Oh, hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. If you like this video and want to see more like it, give it a like and maybe subscribe if you haven't already. Until then, we'll see you next time.